Bill, I want to get to you this question. The capacity to innovate and to change is obviously markedly impacted by what all of these organizations are facing as a result of the economic downturn, the financial crisis we're in. Any advice for us on that? As someone who actually thinks about balance sheets, how do we deal with the resource allocation question? Maybe this is an example, but how do you manage resources more effectively in the face of what every organization is facing as they look at their own budgets as a result of what's happened over the last several months?
May I just say something on technology first?
Sure.
It's incredibly helpful in many dimensions. We have 25 fellows operating in the border areas of Pakistan, so we have a secure way of talking to one another. When you look at it from the point of view of the individual in a village, the difference of being able to be wired to the world, we've known for decades. We've only implemented. It's just one of the most profound changes. The usefulness and the importance is hard to overstate. And there is, since you have a journalism background here, there's, who is the most important publisher in the last decade? It's probably Google. And what's going on? The users need things that are very different. As you move up that curve, people want to know about the future, much more than they want to know about yesterday or even today. If they're actors, they need to be served as actors. That's a different client. So this whole world is evolving, I think, to respond to that need, which is wonderful, all the examples we've used. But there's a risk when you shift to a new set of institutions. The safeguards of professionalism all the way through to privacy for all the actors are at risk. And I think that's a major agenda item for all of us, because if we don't get the information flows right, it will mess up. It's part of the maintenance of the overall system. Now, who loves a financial crisis? I don't think anyone thinks it's particularly great fun. He was telling me that the average organization that he represents has had, what, 5 to 18% reductions. I actually must say that I think when you see the dinosaurs thrashing around and dying, this is actually very helpful. In
the profit sector, not the nonprofit sector.
I think everywhere. I don't think you're seeing that the entrepreneurial organizations are going to suffer from this. In fact, the Air Force got RAND to do a study for it some years ago, and they said, well, how can we make the Air Force more efficient? And basically, nothing worked except whenever there was a big disruption, that seemed to work because it loosened things up, and then people who were more creative could sort of make their ways through the cracks. There are a lot of big cracks at the moment, and I just think this is terrific. The drive to use technology increases. The death of the old system is releasing resources. If we don't resort to too much lemon socialism, which is an Indian phrase that when you have a dying company, you socialize it.
Michael, could I just make one more point about
Sure.
the technology?
And then I want to invite audience start thinking of the questions.
And I start with Kiva.org and how they're using technology to bring caring people together with needy projects or projects that need support. And I think the huge promise, the macro promise of technology is the following, that the challenge that those of us concerned with global development have had is essentially the psychic distance between those who have the resources and education and so on and the people who are hungry and illiterate and abused. And it's not easy. I talked about breast cancer, and all of us know someone personally who is a breast cancer survivor, and we have a relationship to it. There are things we can do personally to help. We know whether it's working or not, and so on and so forth. So we have a relationship and a faith in it that has been very difficult for those of us in global development to replicate, because people wonder whether the change is really taking place, whether the money's really getting through, who's out there anyway. It's impersonal. It's not human nature to kind of sacrifice in an abstract way like that. And I think the technology, I mean, I think Kiva is really just the tip of the iceberg, because I think the potential is going to be there, you know, to mentor and have buddy systems and to have a lot of direct support between caring individuals in the North and people who need a hand up in the South.
Well, then technology pulls this together a bit. I think, as Anthony was mentioning, you can see the well. I know in the Nothing But Nets campaign, you can see the bed net that is going to be delivered to someone in Africa that's going to protect children who might otherwise get malaria. And that, I think, is one of the things that we got to figure out how to do a better job of doing. I mean, storytelling. It's actually, how do you write better scripts that create some kind of narrative? Let me, before we go to questions, I have to ask a very Oval Office-centric type of question, just not surprisingly. You walk into the Oval Office, for some reason you got a photo op with President Obama, you get 30 seconds to bend his ear. What would you say in 30 seconds to him, because that's about all the time you're ever going to get with the president? What would you say to him that would leave him with what he could do that would most help from the public sector, the work that we're trying to do in the independent sector, to move things forward? What is the one thing that he could make a difference on? And we'll go down the line. So
I
I always
say
start with you.
Use government and government funding as a catalyst and not a kind of a stovepipe solution.
Sam.
You need to reform foreign aid, and at the base of that reform is a partnership between the private sector and civil society.
You stand for people can, and we've got to change what happens with children and young people. If they aren't powerful then, they don't master the skills of empathy, teamwork, leadership, change making, they won't have the skills, and the country won't be the sort of country you want.
Anthony.
Continue to set the tone and the leadership by example.
Maybe we will batch that together and figure out how Georgetown can deliver that, because I think that's good, strong advice.